Hi, welcome to the Bookish Quilter, where we talk about quilts and we talk about books. My name is Barbara, and today we're going to talk about adding a flange to your quilt. What is a flange? A flange is a little fold of fabric that you put on a quilt to add a little accent to it. If you need a little pop of color or a little value difference. For instance, here I put my flange between the first and second border. They're both fairly light fabrics, so I wanted to put a little dark flange here. Same thing with this quilt here. In this case, I put it between the body and the border. You're going to figure where on your quilt it's going to be. For instance, here's our quilt. The flange is going to be between this quilt and the border. I'm putting a yellow flange on. So I need to measure my length, top to bottom, cut 2 strips that size, and I need to measure my width, side to side, cut 2 strips that size. A flange does not add extra dimension to your quilt. Once you put the flange on, your borders would then be the same size that they would have been without a flange. The flange is stitched into the seam itself, and I'm going to demonstrate that in just a minute. How do you determine what size flange to make? What size to cut your flange? If you want a flange like this, that's 1/4 inch wide, you need to cut it 1 inch. The formula for your flange is twice the width that you want to see plus 1/2 inch for seam allowances. So this is 1/4 inch. There's 1/4 inch underneath it, so that's 1/2 inch, and then 1/4 inch for each seam allowance. So my flange for my little sample quilt is cut 1 inch, and it's going to be 1/4 inch flange. If you wanted, say you wanted 1/2 inch to show, it's 1/2 inch times 2 is 1 inch plus an extra 1/2 inch for your seam allowance. Easy to do. I stitch my flanges to the body of the quilt. You're going to line up the raw edges, and you're going to do a scant 1/4 inch to about 1/8 inch seam. You need it to be hidden when you put your next piece on, so it cannot be 1/4 inch. It's got to be less than 1/4. I pin them in place. So you're going to do, just like you do borders, do opposite sides first, and then do the remaining sides. To sew on the flange, I'm going to pin my folded flange piece to one of the sides of the quilt top. I'm going to line up raw edges. Raw edges of the flange line up with raw edges of the quilt top. I pin 2 opposing sides, and I'm going to sew with a scant 1/4 inch seam. Do the opposite side. Now I'm going to do the remaining two sides. Notice I do not push back the seam allowance. I keep it folded flat like that. Now I sew the remaining two sides. Clip any threads. And now you're going to add your border pieces. You're going to add your border pieces to the sides that you sewed the flange on first. So these, where your first flanges went on, is where your first border pieces are going to go on. Again, you're going to do the two opposing sides. You're going to pin in place, and this time you're going to sew with a full 1/4 inch seam. Now you're going to push back your border pieces so your seam allowances go towards the border. Just finger press them back. You can press it if you'd like, but for simplicity's sake here, I'm just finger pressing. And I'm taking my two remaining border pieces And I'm going to pin them to the top and bottom. I like to put a pin where the seam allowances are to hold them in place. And again, we're continuing along with our full 1/4 inch seam. And we're going to put our last one on. And here you are with your finished little quilt with a flange. Easy to do. The quilt behind me is a pattern you can purchase as a PDF. I will put a link in the description box below. It's called Focus on Fun, and it takes 2 yards of a focus fabric and a bunch of assorted scraps. And it does contain directions for the flange. Now on to the book. The book is the second novel written by British author Helen Simonson. It's called The Summer Before the War. The summer referred to is the summer of 1914. It's a time of change in England, and the change is going to happen even more quickly once the war gets going. There are wonderful, unforgettable characters in the book. There's Aunt Agatha, Uncle John, their nephews, cousins Hugh and Daniel, who are as different as night and day, and a young woman named Beatrice. Hugh is a young surgeon. Daniel has just graduated from college, and Beatrice has scandalized the village somewhat by being hired as the new Latin teacher. As time goes on, as I said, change occurs faster and faster, and no one is unchanged by the war. The ending is one of the most unexpected endings I've ever come across in a book. It's not a deep book to read. It's a wonderful can't put down story. And again, it's The Summer Before the War by Helen Simonson. And I hope you've enjoyed this. Please like, subscribe, comment, and I will see you next time. Thank you. Have a great day.